Hello and happy Monday. Welcome to Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. Thank you for joining us again for our video podcast series. My name is Harrison Litzel. I am the co-host of this podcast. And this week I have Marquette Bugg. Marquette, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us on here. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is a privilege. I don't think I even knew the name of the podcast until just this moment. And I really like it. So my name, like Harrison said, I'm Marquette Bugg. I am one of the pastors of Edgewood Church. It's a little community church right in the heart of Atlanta. And we're very much a neighborhood church focused hyper locally on our literal neighbors. So a lot of the folks who come to church can walk, they live nearby. I've been getting to do that for about 6 months now. Prior to that, I worked at Starbucks for a minute. That was a special season in my life. But mostly I've been in ministry since basically I was an adult. Mm-hmm. So either working at camps or working for student life, things like that. So I've basically been in ministry since I could be, I guess.
Yeah. Marquette, you and I met during a solar eclipse.
That's right.
I think that we are some of the few people who can say that. And I remember on that day of the solar eclipse being so many things being like, this is an omen. Time will tell, good or bad, but this is an omen. And I feel like for us, we can say that it was a good omen.
I would agree.
That is my memory of us meeting is solar eclipse.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Marquette, tell us a little bit about what reading the Bible is like for you. What tools do you use? What habits do you have? What is it like for you to read the Bible?
Yeah, so this is one of the most important things to me, actually, and one of the best tools that I feel like I can give to other people. So as far as being able to understand the different genres of the Bible, that was a really helpful tool to me along the way. There was a book called How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Fee and Stewart, which was assigned literature for a hermeneutics class I took like 20 years ago. Was it 20 years ago? It was 20 years ago. And that really changed my life. It helped me realize that the way I read the Psalms is going to be different than the way I read the Gospels or the epistles. So that is sort of the framework for how I approach Scripture, as far as where am I situated in the big overarching story, and then what type of literature am I actually reading? Is it Old Testament narrative? Is it wisdom? Is it prophet? And so forth. So for me, having a grasp, I hope this is making sense, but having a grasp of the big meta narrative, the big overarching story, and not just these Polaroid snapshots like I was taught in Sunday school. So I was really good at knowing all the different little stories, but being able to weave them all together and piece them all together, that helps me read the Bible. So I am able to just open it anywhere and recognize, oh, okay, here's where I am in the big story of God's interaction with these people. But then more specifically, I know how to approach that specific writing because I have a little bit of background on what type of writing it is and how to approach it. And so as far as tools go, that Fee and Stewart book has been gold for me. And when I'm given the opportunity to teach, usually biblical literacy is one of my main goals, because I'm if I can give you that, then it sets you free to be able to go read on your own, and learn about God on your own. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think, what you're talking about with the grand narrative, the kind of the overarching narrative, I think what I hear in that is that just takes some familiarity, right? Just kind of repetition and being more and more able to find your place of where you are in the overall story. And then, yeah, I completely agree with you with the idea of genre and how important that is. And it really does just give you a starting place for how to interact with a text, with a passage. I was teaching Sunday school this morning, actually, and was talking with people about different genres of prophetic literature. There's these kind of subgenres that we were talking about the book of Zechariah, and how Zechariah is kind of this bridge in genre between the kind of older prophets and the kind of apocalyptic prophets, and how that helps us to understand. And yeah, just giving people, genres and subgenres, I do think it helps you to give you a mindset and a framework for how to approach that text. That can be really helpful and is a great tool for people to read read the Bible. And like you were saying, like read the Bible on their own, which is, you know, what we're working on when we talk about reading the Bible is easiest. So yeah, I appreciate that. You said, Marquette, you said that the version of the Bible we're going to look at today is the NASB, which is the New American Standard Bible, right? That's what it stands for. What about that version is attractive to you? Why that version?
Well, in that same class that I was just referencing, that hermeneutics class, which is just a fancy word of saying like the art and science of interpretation of scripture, which I think you know that. But that was the text that we used in that class, and so I just kind of stuck with it. I will tell you this though, that like I'm not bound to a specific translation of scripture, because I find that at different times, different translations really hit the home run, so to speak, like of really painting the picture of what was trying to be described there. And so, but the thing that I like about the NASB is it is a little bit wooden in the sense of like it's more word for word kind of a translation. But I like that when I'm studying. But every time I prepare for a sermon, I always read from the Message, NIV, NASB, and King James. Like I toss them all in there, because sometimes one of them will translate a word in such a way that I'm like, ooh, that's beautiful, or that's, seems to be more accurate, more on point. So yeah. So I like NASB because for me it's more of a study tool kind of thing. Seems closer to the Greek and the Hebrew. So
yeah, that's great. I like the idea of comparing, and there is a lot you can gain just from having multiple translations next to each other and see the different ways that the translators work through the text and holding those together.
Yeah, you said that so much better and more succinctly. It's like you've done a podcast before.
sometimes So like we do every week, we're going to look at a Bible passage with no preparation. I haven't even told you what the text is yet.
So no clue. So excited.
We are going to be looking at Psalm 89 verses 20 through 37. Psalm 89 verses 20 through 37. I'm going to read it from the NASB, from the New American Standard Bible. So we'll read the passage and then we'll set a timer for 5 minutes and see what we can do at that time. So here we go with Psalm.
Verses one more time.
Yeah, so it's Psalm 89, 20 through 37. So here we go from the New American Standard. Wait, sorry, one second. I was not prepared, obviously. That's part of the point of the podcast, to not be totally prepared, but I could at least have the right version pulled up. All right, here we go. From the NASB. I have found my servant David. With my holy oil I have anointed him. With whom my hand will be established, my arm will also strengthen him. The enemy will not deceive him, nor will the son of wickedness afflict him. But I will crush his adversaries before him and strike those who hate him. My faithfulness and my favor will be with him, and in my name his horn will be exalted. I will also place his hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers. He will call to me, you are my Father, my God, the rock of my salvation. I will also make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. I will maintain my favor for him forever, and my covenant shall be confirmed to him. So I will establish his descendants forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. If his sons abandon my law and do not walk in my judgments, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their wrongdoing with the rod and their guilt with afflictions. But I will not withhold my favor from him, nor deal falsely in my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant, nor will I alter the utterance of my lips. Once I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David. His descendants shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever like the moon, and a witness in the sky is faithful. Selah. All right. So let's set our timer for 5 minutes. And Marquette, what stands out to you from that? What did you hear? What do you notice?
Yeah. So so one thing that I noticed, first of all, was just the selection that was chosen for us. And so I just want to speak about that just briefly. The fact that what was chosen from the lectionary was verses 20 through 37. And that's not usually how I would approach a psalm. I would usually read the whole psalm.
Right.
So there's part of me that's like, I feel like we just threw the book open to the middle of the chat of the story. And I'm like, okay, so we're talking about this covenant with David, and feel like we would have probably benefited from getting to read the whole thing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my first observation, is that immediately I was like, ugh, I wish we could go to the, start at the beginning, but the lectionary does that sometimes. But the other thing that came to mind for me here is this word, that I think in the translation, I think you're reading from the NASB 2020,
Okay,
and
it's
there's one
possible. Yeah.
from 95. Yeah. And the 95 version is translating that favor that you're using as loving
Mm-hmm.
kindness, which
Mm-hmm.
is the hesed word that God uses, or that's used repeatedly in Old Testament for God's covenant, the way that God behaves within covenant, this loving kindness. And so I that was the first thing that I noticed, was the repetition of that hesed word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It was interesting. We started reading in the middle of a poem, which I don't
Yeah.
know a lot about poetry, but I know that's not really the way that works.
That's not
And
how it
so,
works.
yeah, that was interesting. And yeah, I noticed that the point of view of this is from God, right? God is
Mm.
the first person pronouns here, which is not what I'm used to in the Psalms. I feel like usually when I read a psalm, it's more of a songwriter or someone talking about God and speaking to God. God is often the second person, the subject or the object of the psalm. Whereas this one, God is speaking in the first person, which is just kind of an interesting thing, to have words of God in a song like this. It kind of grabbed my attention.
Yeah, agreed. I noticed that because I cheated and glanced back, that the first 19 verses feel more like a typical psalm,
Mm,
that are from that first person, where they're saying things like, I know that this is not the passage we're talking about, but I just got to back up. It starts with, I'll sing of your steadfast love, that hesed, loving kindness, oh Lord, forever. And so it feels that way when you start, but then it transitions halfway through into this, here's what God is seeing, which I think is beautiful, because
mm,
we do so often in the Psalms, we're seeing people like David describe what they have seen and experienced of God, and for the point of view to be turned, and to hear, here's what God is seeing, and for it to be this very favorable and loving um point of view, and it even mentions there along the way, even if you blow it, basically was the
mm-hmm.
idea. Even if you royally
Right.
mess this up, you can count on me to keep my promises and continue to be steadfast in what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I
yeah.
heard that with you're talking about that hesed term, which is that's the Hebrew word, right?
Yeah.
And it's translated in the version I read as favor, and you said in yours loving kindness. And kind of one of the aspects of that word is we don't really have a great translation for it, but it does
Mm.
often point to this covenant relationship, right? And I think that here in this psalm specifically, we see some of those sort of dynamic aspects of that word, because it's loving kindness, but part of that loving kindness is destroying the adversaries of David. And like, if you mess up, like, I will punish you, but I will also keep true to you. And so, like,
Mhm.
loving kindness, but I think that part of that term is it's more expansive than that, because it is this faithfulness and love even when things are tough. And
Mhm.
sometimes the things are going to be tough because it's you messed up, and sometimes things are going to be tough because I'm wiping out the people around you. And to see that in the Psalms, I think we see that in a few different places in the Psalms. This kind of the militancy of God for God's people, and to see that link to that covenant faithfulness and that loving kindness is always it's challenging for me to kind of encounter that and to understand
Mhm.
that, but it also just speaks to the way that the people needed who the people needed God to be for them.
Right. I think when I'm hearing you talk, the thing that's occurring to me is I'm used to that kind of language coming from the prophets,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I'm not used to hearing that kind of language come in a psalm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think what I'm appreciating about that is, that these psalms typically are spoken as prayers, or used in worship, and right, like
Mm-hmm.
most of the
Yeah.
time, that's how the psalms were being employed. And so for those concepts to be included, not just from a prophet speaking at the people,
Mm-hmm.
but the people sort of expressing it for themselves, that they can
Yeah.
expect that from God. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't just a message received, but it's also a message that they are expressing.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So that's 5 minutes. That's it.
No
That's
way.
that's all the time. I know it goes quick.
Yeah,
So if you're gonna
scratching the surface.
if you're going to spend more time with this passage, if you're going to revisit anything from it this week, what do you want to spend a little bit more time with?
Well, I think what I said in the beginning was I think I would probably just expand and go and read the whole passage. But I think if I were going to like meditate on something, it would probably be this verse 34 and 35. Is that where it's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 30 verses 34 and 35. Um, my covenant I will not violate, nor will I alter the utterance of my lips. And I think there was another part where God was describing faithfulness. Let me see if I would love to be able to find it so that I could read it verbatim. So since I can't, oh, here we go. Verse 24, my faithfulness and my loving kindness will be with him, and in my name his horn will be exalted. Well, actually, I guess what I would say is I'm going to go revisit this passage so I can find the part that I'm actually thinking about that's all centering on this God's faithfulness unconditionally.
Yeah. And I think I'm in a similar place to you of this idea of when God makes a promise, God's going to keep that promise, and God is faithful. And so I think I want to spend a little bit of time of dwelling on what is it that God has promised? What is it that we can rely upon? What is it that expresses God's faithfulness? And what are the things that are expectations I have of God that may not actually be promises, that are things that I have distorted and put on God and then said, hey, you promised this and it's not happening. But in reality, it's my own, misperceptions. I think that I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about, if God is faithful, what is God faithful in doing? But so that's it for this passage. That's it for Psalm 89, 20 through 37, not the whole Psalm, but just this part of it for this lectionary text. So Marquette, if folks want to connect with your ministry a little bit more, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm one of the pastors here at Edgewood Church, and you can find us online at edgewoodchurchatlanta.org, edgewoodchurchatlanta.org, and on Facebook, Edgewood Church Atlanta. Those are the easiest ways to try to connect. And I would love to hear from anybody who's interested in trying to get in touch.
Yeah. So Marquette, we'll link to both of those things in the podcast notes and on YouTube. Marquette, you told me that you actually preached this morning, and I think that'll be up. You said on Facebook, and so if you want to hear a little bit from Marquette, you can do that right now, and you can listen to her sermon from this week. But Marquette, we really appreciate you coming on and spending a little bit of time in the Psalms with us today. And until next week, everybody, we hope that you continue to read the Bible. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all of that stuff as well. And we will see you next week.